Welcome to Healing Generations, a podcast creating a dialogue uplifting the importance of healing, strengthening, and supporting our communities, and that addresses the disparities and inequities in communities of color. Healing Generations is brought to you by the Healing Generations Institute, a collaborative initiative of the National Compadres Network and the Brotherhood of Elders. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on our new releases.
Buenas, my name is Cisco Gallardo with the Healing Generations podcast, Elder Edition. I want to thank all our listeners, all our contributors, all our supporters. Thank you for sharing the message of healing and healthy living in your community, in your home. It all starts in your home, the way you interact with people at your house, just the way you are. It's very important. So before we get going, I want to remind all our listeners that if this is your first time, please do us a favor and go to your podcast listening platform. If you're listening on Apple Music, or if you're listening on Amazon or Spotify, any of the ones, please give us a review, give us some feedback, because that helps people discover the podcast. And I just want to make sure that, we get our message out the best we can. So before we get going, I'm going to do the 4 directions. We always want to take a little bit of time and acknowledge our ancestors, acknowledge those that support us, those that help us, and those also that need help. So I burned a little Palo Santo here in honor of the elders, the ancestors, those yet to come. So let's turn to the east and think of all the men in our lives, our grandfathers, our fathers, our tios, our brothers, our sons, our homies, the ones that are in our life, our coworkers. We want to bring their spirit into this, we want to think about them, all their blessings, all the beautiful things that they have in their life, and the acknowledgement of their traumas too, that we're all trying to overcome in that way. And then I want you to turn to the west. But as you're turning, I want to acknowledge our people in between the men and the feminine energy. We want to acknowledge them too, the blessings that they give us, the strength that they endure. We want them to be good and healthy and be acknowledged. And then we face the west and we acknowledge our grandmothers, our mothers, our tias, our nieces, our granddaughters, our partners, We want to acknowledge them. We want to acknowledge all the women in our life, even our co-workers, everybody, we want to acknowledge all the women, all the blessings that they bring, the loving energy that they bring, even their traumas. We have to acknowledge some of their traumas that they go through, because it affects all of us, in that way. We want to help them heal and be better women the way they want us to be better men. Same thing we want for them, so we'll acknowledge them. And then I want you to turn all the way around to your left to the north direction, where we acknowledge all our elders, where we acknowledge our ancestors, those that lived before us, those that are struggling, those that have left us this year. We want to think about them, We think about all our ancestors, the shoulders that we stand on. We want to think about them, We want to think about our elders. A lot of times our elders, they're lonely. We want you to, if you see an elder, talk to them, say hi, and you'll be surprised what a smile you'll put on their face, because sometimes in society, we don't honor our elders like we should, So I just want to acknowledge them, acknowledge their blessings that they give us, their wisdom that they have. And then we turn around again and we face the south for our future generations, those kids that are not even born yet. We want a better life for them. So we want to acknowledge their existence, that they're going to come into our life, and we want to make the world a better place. Our children are the little babies. Those are in kindergarten, those that started school this year. We want to think about them. They have a good education, a good life education too. That's important. Character development, all those things. We want that for our young people. We want to make the world a better place for them. And then we turn around to the center. We acknowledge the sun, Tonantiu, the light, the hope that the sun represents, that new day, that the metaphor of a new day is a start, that we utilize in our life culturally, the sun, the kind of warm, loving energy that the sun provides, We want to acknowledge that, the hope. And then we want to touch the earth, acknowledge Mother Earth, Tonantzin, for all that she gives us, and how the world is changing in that way with climate change and all that. We want to, ask Tonantzin to be gentle with us, and take care of her as the best we can. And then, of course, we want to acknowledge the Creator, those that give us life, whatever you call the Creator, if it happens to be Jesus, Allah, whatever the terminology you use, the Creator is all the same to me. And I want to acknowledge the Creator here in a good way, that we can create a healing and loving life for each and every one of us in that way. I just want to say those words. And again, I want to thank our listeners for taking that time out, take a deep breath, acknowledge your life, good and bad. I think that's the start of every day, should be in that way. So we have a special guest here. I wanna acknowledge him. I'm gonna let him introduce himself. But not often do we get somebody who's contributed to NCN in a big way. A former board member, chair of the board, those types of things. But I'll let him introduce himself. I mean, go ahead.
Gracias, Cisco. I really appreciate it, brother. My name is Leo Lopez. And as you mentioned, Cisco, I've been with NCN on this journey for many years. I want to say at least 21, if not more years now, as part of NCN. And gracias por la invitación.
That's beautiful. Thank you for agreeing to be a part of the podcast. And, your voice is important, why you got connected, the things you've overcome in your life, the things that you're dealing with in that way. So can you share a little bit about yourself, your family, your background, and your journey up to this point in life?
Yes, definitely. My story and my journey is, I would say, definitely unique in its own way because we're all individuals, right? And so, but I think it's also very familiar to many others who've probably had similar journey as I have. I currently live right now in the Yakima Valley in the state of Washington. And my family, migrated over here, from northern Mexico and then Texas, and then from Texas here to Washington State. And so, we have a long history here in this state as migrants following, the harvest and the crops. And that was the journey and story of my immediate family as well as my own. And just very blessed, to be here on this earth with a very good foundation that was provided to me by my family. Very blessed to had very caring, parents. I'm the husband to Cindy Lopez and the father to Jalisa Anaí Lopez, Karina Elisa Lopez, and Leonel Cuauhtemoc Lopez. In addition to that, I'm also the son of Leonel Guardado Lopez and Sylvia Perez Lopez. And I'm also the grandson, to grandparents that are out there, Arturo Lugo Perez and Rebecca Caballero Perez as well. So, that's a little bit about who I am very briefly. But, the journey up to this point is, as I was sharing, my family migrated back and forth between, Texas and Washington State. And so I grew up, in that type of life where we followed crops, did the harvest, and I had some very valuable lessons along the way. I was a migrant child, so therefore I had to go to night school, for example, as we were working out in the fields, those of us that were working in the fields. Thankfully, the local school district provided, that type of support where they knew that as migrant students, we'd be working out in the fields, really early in the morning until about at least 9, where then we'd be able to come back home and then go to school, get off at 3:00 like, normal students would do, but then we'd stay back and stay on until about 6:00 in the evening. And so, that's a little bit about kind of who I am and where I come from. And again, just blessed to have had that experience. Others may see that differently in terms of like, wow, you had to work as a child, and but there was a lot of lessons there, that were provided by my family, in particular my father and my mother, and my abuelitos, who encouraged all my siblings, to learn from that experience, respect that experience, but also grow from that experience as well.
Yeah, I know that's hard work. And when you were talking, I was thinking about my own family. That's how my grandpa came here. My dad's dad, he came to the United States, working in the fields, made his way up to Colorado, and they worked all over the place until World War II, then things changed, And it's, a lot of our families have worked in the campos, worked in the fields and all that. And it's a tough life, I'm glad I didn't have to do that, but I appreciate those who do, you know what I mean? Because I even watch them today and I think, man, that's so hard work. It's a blessing that we have people to pick our food for us in a good way. I always try to think about them and all the struggles, even the march that they just did here in California to Sacramento, acknowledging the rights and of farm workers. It's always important for people to realize that when we get our food, that it comes from somewhere. Someone has to grow it. Someone has to pick it. All that, before it gets to us, what a blessing that is. So what lessons have you learned from your culture, your family, life experience along the way that helped you in your healing and development? I don't know all the different aspects of how you got on this road, of healing, acknowledgement, just how we live our life,
Yeah. Again, thank you, Cisco. Because I also want to acknowledge, all those, folks who work out there in the fields and harvest that food for us that we're able to, nourish ourselves with, right? And for the most part, at a decent price. So, I think, as part of my journey and part of my cultura is that, being Mexicanos, Tejanos as well, and making that journey and being brought up in a very familial way has been my teachings and my blessing. Again, as I mentioned earlier, I was fortunate. I got to grow up with my mother and my father, but also a very large extended family. I have a lot of tios and tias. Had both sets of grandparents. One of those sets of grandparents ended up living with us, as they got older. I got to see my mom, care for my abuelita and then my abuelito. And so there were many lessons learned. And just being part of that cultura is that, we take care of each other. Family comes first. And not to say that, there weren't issues along the way, because I think any family has issues that arise. It's what you do about those issues and how you learn from them. And so, you name it, we had it in our family, experience with, drugs, alcohol, just living a different type of lifestyle. And my family would always point out, those things like, hey, your Theo's struggling with this, or hey, your Theo's struggling with that. Your brother, your sisters are struggling with this. And it was never looked at as, that they were less than, but rather that, how can we help them and how can we help each other and what can we learn from that? Not only learn from the good things, but also learn from the bad things that happen in life. And so, those have been, a lot of the teachings and just our cultura in general, how we do. You mentioned it earlier at the beginning, of the podcast, is the respect and the dignity that we give our elders. That was something that was taught to me from the very, very beginning, that as far as I can think back about the importance of them. And I can think of times just having some really great conversations, not only with my own parents, but also with my abuelita, my abuelito, just the things that they experienced, how life was different for them in that era to where we were at that point in my life, as a child, as a kid, as a young man, and to where I'm at now. I'm a grandfather now. And, I reflect on that and it's kind of crazy, when you think like, wow, that my life is at that point now where I'm a grandfather. And I think about the stories and the consejos that were given to me, by my grandparents that at that time didn't make a whole lot of sense, but do now, even when your own parents are trying to tell you the same thing. And that's for me is the beauty of my experience and the blessing I believe that I have, because when I got connected to NCN, like I shared over 20 years ago, over 21 years ago, I had just lost my father in a tragic accident. And it was very, very painful. And being connected to NCN in the way that it was like going home, if that makes any sense, where a lot of the la cultura cura, the sharing of information and just being in comunidad, really helped me through that difficult time. Although I had my own family and so forth, but just knowing that there were other brothers and sisters struggling too, in different ways. And just that healing that happens, of being able to share and having somebody listen, somebody who looks like you, somebody who has same valores as you, somebody who has some of the same teachings as you, and the importance of that. And so I just want to circle back that, that has been some of the healing lessons that I've had, and the opportunities that have been given to me, not only from my immediate family, but also from NCN and the work that it has done and continues to do to this day.
So while as you're talking, I'm thinking to myself, how did you get introduced? What was your first interaction with NCN or people involved with NCN where you're like, oh, all right. I mean, because NCN is the vehicle for La Cultura Cura, but there's many avenues to La Cultura Cura. But how did you get connected? What was that first interaction? And when you were like, yeah, this is something, what was the vibe at the time?
At that time, I was doing a training actually in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I was doing a training there on fatherhood. And when I was there at that conference, I think it was a Migrant Head Start conference, if I'm not mistaken. And that's where I had first met Cuco Rodriguez. And he was the one who had introduced me to the National Compadres Network. He came in and sat in on my training. He was there as well, training, and we just, started talking. And he was like, hey, brother, we got a lot in common, and some of the same things we're doing, and I'm doing. And so he's the one who introduced me, to the National Compadres Network many, many years ago. And so that's how I was introduced. And from that moment on, and again, that was just, shortly after my father had passed. And he had said, hey, brother, I know you don't know about the work that goes on out here, or, who we are, but, we got the Círculo coming up over in Jolon. And so that's how I got introduced. I got invited to the Círculo not knowing, exactly what was going to happen or what was going to go on. And again, that's where I was referencing earlier, that again was just a perfect time. And I think, as you know this, Cisco, everything happens for a reason. Sometimes we don't know it. And for me, it was not, happenstance. I believe that I, connected with Cuco, and he introduced me to the National Compadres Network, and I went to my first Círculo, where there was a lot of healing, brother.
So your first interaction was Jalon, like a full retiro.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a lot of medicine to take at the I always trip out on the guys that go the first time, because especially if they're not connected to the ways at all, or even understand the language, their heart calls them to, but they don't really know it yet. And to see that just kind of take them during it, is a beautiful thing, I think, because if your heart's open, and I think we talk about this a lot, about creating a safe space, but, I know that's kind of like a hippie knowledge of what's going on, but at the same time, creating a safe space is important because it does allow, and it's really the ambiance of the room. It's about how people come together, the language we speak, the kind of, just the ritual of it all is it's inviting. And, I'm glad that happened to you. But over time with Cuco, did you get more trainings? Did you get how did you get more involved, but beyond the retiro, that first initial connection?
Yeah, definitely. And, the start of it was with Cuco, but when I went to my first Círculo, that's when I got to meet, many of our elders. I'm very, very blessed to have been able to meet a lot of those elders, some of whom are not here with us anymore, who have passed on to that other life and are on that other journey. For example, Jerry Theo was at that particular Círculo. Papa Bear, Isaac Cardenas, was also there. And, others, just very blessed in that way. And so that's how it started. And it just continued to grow from there. As you know, being part of NCN and the Círculos in general, you just create connections, and you continue to keep in contact. And, it just evolved from there. And so I just was able to continue to come every year, to the Círculo, and have only missed one. And that was the birth of my son, Cuauhtemoc. That was the only time I missed a Círculo. But in between all that was also, being invited to the various trainings that were going on. Very first one was Cara y Corazón, and then Joven Noble. And it just continued from there. And so I was able to be trained in those curriculums, and I started providing that training where I was working at that time. And so I've had a journey, in terms of being connected to the work, La Cultura Cura, the various curriculums, and not only incorporating them into my own life, but also being able to share those wherever I was working. And then from there, over the years, I want to think back maybe 8, 10 years, I was asked if I would consider coming onto the board of NCN, which I thought was, I was very, very honored for that opportunity. And then from there, I did join the board as a member. And then I think for the past 8 years now, I up until about earlier this year, I was the board chair for NCN. And so, as you can see, there's a lot of in between, right? 21 years ago to today. But that's just a little bit of, my connection and what has happened. And, what I can share is that it's been very, very helpful.
Thank you for sharing that with us. For those that are just listening and you don't know much about the National Compadres Network, long time ago, well, it's a long time, but it doesn't seem that long to me because I'm a viejo. But in 1988, they gathered for the first time in Jalon, California, and they did it. It was a way for men to. I mean, they were all successful in life. If you haven't heard the story, from Maestro, I think one of the very first episodes of Healing Generations podcast, Maestro talks about it. But it was that first initial gathering where men who were, some of them were already professionally successful, as they say, but in life they were still struggling, not being there for their kids, acknowledging past trauma in their life, working towards it. And they decided to gather with no alcohol, no drugs, just men, and just sitting down and talking to one another and building those connections, right? And creating this kind of a healing type of atmosphere to the point where men said, hey, we should do this every year. And it's still going on to this day, which is a beautiful thing. I'm glad that's how, as I started working with the NCN, they invited me and I was connected to the ways already, but I went there and it really did change a lot of the way I look at life and the way I interact with, interact with a lot of people, just, my home life, my children, my friends, all that, more appreciative. So, if you haven't heard that story in detail, please go back and listen to Maestro tell it. He tells it much better than me, it tells the story. But tell me now, Leo, what are you doing now with yourself, and how have you built on all those lessons in life to where you are right now?
Yeah, definitely. Where I'm at now is I am, supporting NCN at this particular time, supporting NCN in all its ventures that it has. Although I did leave the board, earlier this year, I still continue to support NCN in various capacities, and so that's a great blessing I believe I continue to have, and being that connected to NCN in that way. But I'm a social worker by profession. That was part of my earlier story I didn't get to share of, having grown up working in the fields and being supported, by my parents to say, hey, mijo, education's important. It was always reminded, education's important if you have opportunities here. And so I did. I took advantage of the opportunity that my parents gave me and that apoyo that I had, from all, my grandparents, extended relatives. And so went to school and went on, bachelor's, master's, went to graduate school. And so by profession, I'm a social worker. And I continue to do that work. And I've been an administrator, director. And as of recent, I had been working for a private operating foundation for many years and did some really good work out there, made a lot of really good connections. And so that's what I continue to do, is offer my services in various different ways, and NCN being one of those. And, just very blessed in that way to have been able to do that and continue to do it. And again, that in itself is also, part of our healing, in terms of having opportunities to do those type of things in different ways. I mean, for me, that's how I heal, is that I like to give back. And that was another lesson taught to me, from my family. In particular, my father, Lionel, who would say, mijo, aquí estamos para servir. And, it's no surprise that I became a social worker and do it in that way. But, there's so many different avenues that you can do with that work. And I've been very blessed to be able to do many different things other than just direct practice, so just a little bit of that.
Yeah, there's a lot of elements to the work,
Yes.
being a social worker, being an admin, doing more of the administrative piece, fundraising, all those types of things. there's always the people that do the work on the ground, but there's a lot of people behind them. You know,
Yes.
a lot of people behind them. And we have to acknowledge those people that do that work so that the people on the ground, my wife's a social worker. So I very much appreciate social workers. I see what she goes through, you know, helping families, dealing with different things. And it's tough, you know, I appreciate, you know, the effort that it takes, because a lot of times people are sometimes a little critical of social work and other things, but it's a tough business to be in. You know, it's hard to advocate, do all those different things, and also navigate your own life and your own traumas and your family. And it's a balancing act. You know, it takes a toll on families. But as we start to wind down, I want to know from you, Leo, when you think about healing, what does healing mean to you?
You know, it's a very deep question, right? And for me personally, it's healing for me is that, am I balanced myself? And when I say balanced, you know, am I living by my palabra I gave a long time ago that was handed down to me from the generations before me? When I'm out there, whatever I do, however I do it, I always have to remember that I'm representing my ancestors that came before me. And so for me, that's healing in its own way, is that I have to remind myself, am I balanced? And am I balanced in a way that, am I listening? Am I hearing? Am I being supportive in everything that I do? And so when I interact with anybody, am I giving you my 100%? And that's part of my healing, that I also do that with my family. My family is part of my healing. Without my familia, I would not be well balanced. And so, one, it's individually, but the second part, and a very important part, is, do I have good connections and good relationships with my familia? First and foremost, with my immediate family, you know, my children, my daughters, my son, with my pareja, with my wife, Cindy. And then also, you know, with all the other relatives, and not just only familial relatives, but all of our other relatives, you know, those that we live with and this larger communities wherever we're located, as well as, you know, everyone else who's out there, you know, trying their best as well, you know, to have healing and be healed. And again, I'm just very grateful for NCN and many other organizations that have been connected and are connected to NCN, and are trying to do the same. And so when you ask that question, you know, for me, that's what it means is, you know, for myself, for my family, and everyone else that I'm connected to in many different ways at many different levels.
That's beautiful. You know, connection, a lot of times people don't realize how important connection is. You know, during the pandemic, I heard a lot of mental health. They were talking about, man, I just feel depressed. I feel anxious, you know, not knowing what's going to happen, those types of feelings. And it really sparked kind of like an issue that sometimes are in everyday life where you're just working, and we didn't have that like distraction of we can't go anywhere or do anything. It really highlighted the need for us to have a connection. And in life, sometimes even if you lost that connection, you could reconnect to something and create your own connections. You know, sometimes you can't choose your familia, but who you're born with, but you could choose your family. You know, you could make a family for yourself in a good way. So with that, I want to ask you one more question, because I think it's important. This is the Elder edition. So we're kind of in between. Our position in life is kind of in between. We're not elders. We're elders in training, but we're not there yet. And then we have young adults right below us that are, and I don't mean below like a hierarchy, just next to us. And, you know, we've been in this particular area of life, this elder part of our days. It's difficult to navigate sometimes, right? Because we still have a lot to learn, but we also live through a lot at the same time. So we're kind of in between. But what advice or counsel would you give to somebody that are in our phase of life for health and healing? You know, what is their role, and what advice would you give them for development? You know what I mean? Like I know you did a lot of different work professionally, personally, and you know, what advice would you do? Because I think a lot of people I meet, they're like, I wanna start to heal. I want to have a better life, but they don't know where to start. What would you say a good place to start?
Yeah, no, again, another deep question I think that you pose, Cisco, and a great one. Is that, I like the way you just shared that, we're like in this in between, and we are. And so when I think of your question is like we have that one foot, in the young adult or adult, phase of our life. Then we got that other foot, on that elder role that we know that we are going to be playing a much bigger part here, in due time. And so I think we're very blessed that we have this double medicina. And I say that because we have this double medicina is that we have that one foot in still, in that certain phase of our life where as adults we can think of certain things and use our experience in a certain way. And then we got this other foot with immense medicina and responsibility as we enter into that elder stage and take that, and share that as wisdom with those younger folks that are coming up behind us. And so when I think about that, I think the advice that I have is embrace it all. It can be scary. No matter where you're at, it can be scary at any given time. And I think the advice that I give is it's okay to be scared, but it's also okay to embrace those good things that are coming and utilize them in a way that's going to help yourself, help your familia, help your connections, and help many others that are out there. And so I hope that makes sense. But the way you shared it just a minute ago about in between is that we have that one foot in, one foot out, and we're double blessed because we have that medicina of knowing where we're at and where we're about to go. And so I just say embrace those very, very good things, to those that are coming up behind us.
Thank you for that. That was a beautiful way of kind of addressing the question, and I appreciate that. I just want to remind everybody: there's no time, there's no right time. The time is now. You know what I mean? Like if you really want to change, or you just want to improve your life, there you could start today. There's no problem with it. And if you kind of slide back a little bit, it's all right. It's part of the learning process. Count your blessings. And even though we all have cargas, we all have baggage from time to time. Some of it's not yours. It's all right to put it down and continue on. So with that, I want to thank everybody again for listening. I want to thank you, Leo, for your insight, your wisdom, your knowledge too. I appreciate, your journey and the commitment you gave to NCN up to this point and where we're going in the future. It's kind of exciting time for us, I think, because this message and work of providing support and bringing the message of La Cultura Cura is one it's a beautiful journey, but there's a lot more communities that need that. I hear it all the time about, man, we could really use some of that medicine here. And they just have to realize they need to reconnect to it. They have the medicine already, but they just need to know how to verbalize it, how to show it, those types of things. So I want to thank you. I want to let our listeners know, as we're talking about healing, is right here in LA at the California Endowment on October 19th. The Healing Generations Institute is doing an Indigenous Wellness and Health Conference or gathering. We're not really calling it a conference, we're calling it a gathering because we're coming together to talk about this in a good way, share a meal together, have circle together, and just, build those connections. So if you want to find out more about that, go to our NCN, the National Compadres Facebook page. There's many posts. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, all our handles. That if you follow that, you're going to learn more about things that we're doing. We also have another initiatives, just for the women. They have their own circle. They have their own teaching circles, all these different things. And then we also have a fatherhood initiative that's going on, webinars, things like that. So go to our Facebook page, check it out, get involved wherever you can. The most important thing is as you heal yourself, help out somebody else to do the same thing. I think that's important. And any last messages you want to say, Leo?
Just one last thing, because you touched on it too earlier, and that is around mental health, especially during this pandemic, right? That I think maybe might be slowly, coming out of, but it's yet to still be seen if we're fully out, right? But it's important to seek help. It's okay to ask, for help. I think sometimes part of our cultura is, we don't talk about mental health in a way, that we should, and that it is important to reach out and ask, and that we can also be of support to others, and so that's what I would like to just share and remind folks about, if you need somebody to talk to, please reach out. It's really important.
Yeah, take care of yourself. It's all right to
Yep.
say, I know as men in particular, and for some women too, I'm not trying to be sexist in any way, but I think men in particular have a hard time saying they need help. And it's difficult just to say that, it's all right. I need a little bit of help. And it took me a long time to learn that lesson, and I'm still learning it. Some things I just want to do myself, and I know it's difficult, but that's one thing we're striving for. Again, it's not perfection, it's progress. Just do the best you can. So I want to thank all our listeners one more time. Thank you. I wanted to let you know we're already past 100 episodes. This is amazing. So again, send us an email or a message or a comment. Let us know what topics you would like us to explore. Maybe somebody you would like us to interview. Anytime you can do that, it's going to be a good thing. So again, thank you again from the Elders Edition. Palabra.
Gracias.
For more information about Healing Generations and the Healing Generations Institute, visit nationalcompadresnetwork.org and be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with our new releases.